Today we're joined by Rosie Sherry, who is the founder of Rosieland.
I specialise in community building, and I've been doing that for about 15 years, starting out with meetups, but then I spent over 10 years building up Ministry of Testing.
Why don't you give us the reasoning behind why you decided to start a community for those who are doing community?
When I started looking into the community world to see what existed, how people were doing things, what kind of content was out there, the more I dove in, the more I was like, this is just not doing it for me. There just isn't enough out there for community builders.
It's really good, and the content you are writing is really good. What should some practical steps be to really dive into that community?
Justifying that a community is not a specific space or a specific tool. It's about working with the people.
Your job at the CM is, yes, to provide value to your business or whatever your business goals are, but also you're there just to be the voice of the people.
These are the traps in community that we need to figure out. I don't have solutions for them, but it's just things that I observe.
Rosie, why don't you let us know a little bit about yourself and say hello? Hello and welcome to the Digital Community Managers podcast, where we chat with community managers, champions and founders about their experience leading and supporting digital communities. My name's Pete Heslop and I lead the team here at Steadfast Collective, and we exist to craft digital applications that bring people together online. We created the Digital Community podcast to be a bite-sized look into what it takes to start, grow and scale your digital communities. Today, we're joined by Rosie Sherry, who is the founder of Rosieland. Rosie, why don't you let us know a little bit about yourself and say hello?
Hey, Pete. Thanks for having me. I'm Rosie. I'm founder of Rosieland, which is, I guess, a little land in the virtual world at the moment, at least. All about community building. I obviously specialize in community building. And I've been doing that for about 15 years, originally starting out with meetups, but then I spent over 10 years building up Ministry of Testing, which was should I say, a community-driven company. And then I also led the community over at Indie Hackers for a couple of years.
Nice. So your first kind of entrance into the world of being a community manager was Ministry of Testing. Is that right?
Yeah, meetups and then Ministry of Testing, but like the first, I'd say proper community, I would call Ministry of Testing.
Nice. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, I would summarize it concisely. It's a community of practice for software testers. So it's just, trying to address the need of a specific career path, a specific niche. So you get software developers in tech, but also in tech you get testers who kind of try to, I wouldn't say break software, but they try to help improve it and look for holes and all of those kind of things. And I started it at the time because I was a tester and I kind of saw that there was a need for the community. And around that same time, I had also discovered what community was, and I kind of fell in love with the idea of community building. And I was like, I want to do more community. How can I do it? I was like, I know, I'll just start a community for software testers because there doesn't seem to be something that I'm happy with out there at the moment.
Nice. And then Indie Hackers, Indie Hackers for me, I remember in the early days, especially of Indie Hackers being like, that was the place where there was so much great content coming out from the Indie Hackers team. Tell us about your experiences over there.
Yeah, so it's kind of a nice segue. Like Ministry of Testing was a bootstrapped or is a bootstrap company, or in indie type company, as I would kind of probably define it more now. And that's what Indie Hackers was all about. So it kind of really aligned with who I was and what I had experienced doing. And when I wanted to step back from Ministry of Testing, I had in my mind that I want to do two things. I either want to focus in on community or I want to focus in on business, both from a community perspective. And the opportunity to work at Indie Hackers came up, and partly it was because I had done an early interview with them. So when they first started, they kind of became popular for their interviews, their kind of business interviews. of how these kind of businesses were started, and particularly they got a lot of attention because of the transparency they kind of insisted on with like how much money people were actually making.
Mm.
So I think I was like number 17 or something, like the 17th interview.
Okay.
And I think there are hundreds now. I'm not sure if they still do them, but so it was quite early on. But like when I was looking to kind of move on from Ministry of Testing, I saw that Cortland, the founder, was looking for some social media help, and I was like, oh, I could do that, even though it was way below like everything that I'd done before. But I kind of like raised my hand because I just saw it as like a way to kind of move away from my previous company, and it was an excuse to kind of um, dip my toes into another community. And I was really curious to like see how it was run behind the scenes.
Mm.
But what ended up happening was I chatted to Cortland, and then that ended up turning into a community role instead of a social role.
Mm.
And obviously, it aligned better and made more sense. Um, and yeah, I was there for 2 years as a contractor. Kind of like just kept renewing the contract for 2 years.
Nice. And now they got acquired by Stripe.
Yeah, they were acquired by Stripe before I joined, so they
Okay.
were acquired quite early on, within like 6 months.
Yeah.
So obviously, I was kind of on Stripe budget. I guess they had like a
Okay.
budget to spend, and yeah, it's kind of nice.
Nice. And then finally, Rosieland. We've touched on it briefly, but I'm a member of Rosieland. But why don't you give us the reasoning behind why you decided to start a community for those who are doing community?
Yeah, it's actually really similar to Ministry of Testing. So even though like I'd done community for years, I never really participated in the community world, and I kind of knew of the things that existed. Um, but then I had all this kind of experience of building up Ministry of Testing,
Mm.
and when I started kind of looking into the community world to see what existed, how people were doing things, what kind of content was out there, what kind of best practices, so to speak. I was just the more I kind of dove in, the more I was like, this is just not doing it for me. There just isn't enough out there for community builders.
Mm.
Um, and then COVID hit, and like community got even more popular. It was kind of on the rise a bit, but COVID kind of like threw it into this whole new world. Um, so yeah, I guess like I had done my indie hacker thing, I had done my business community thing that kind of scratched that itch, and
Mm.
I was like, well, I'm going to start writing about community, and that's kind of how it started. I started a newsletter, a kind of roundup, and then I started a paid newsletter to force me to write. So I had never
Mm.
been a consistent writer at all. Um, I wasn't even really a writer. I had like written things in the past, but not a lot. Um, and just by switching on like a paid subscription thing, that was what forced me to write. And as soon as I got my
Mm.
first paid subscriber, I felt like I couldn't turn back. And it's been great. It's been like almost every week for the past 2.5 years or so. I've been writing, which is amazing. So yeah, I never thought I would have been able to do that.
No, it's really good, and the content you are writing is really good and legitimately worth reading. And one of the main reasons why I'm a member at Rosieland is not only because of the good community on Slack and whatnot, but is because I know that if there's something that would be really helpful to read, like a code of conduct or an example of a job description, you probably have already written it and put it in the resources somewhere. So it's like a great filing cabinet of Rosie's brain is what Rosieland is, because everything you've kind of thought, oh, that'd be
Yeah,
helpful for someone. I remember being like, "Oh, is there a list of books that you would recommend?" And then you were like, "Yeah, of course there is." And like there was this list of like loads and loads of books. I was like, "Right, okay, yeah, I should have thought Rosie would have already had this. So yeah, no, it's really good.
Yeah, the curation aspect I've taken pretty seriously. I think the only challenge with that is like how do I make it more easy to find? And I think that's, a challenge just not only for community but for any kind of content website. Is like how do you make it so that these things are easier to find? And then with like a private paid community is like how do you make it? Do you make it like public or
Mm.
behind a wall? And then it just starts to get confusing. But yeah, I try to encourage people just to ask, and then the more they ask, the more I can like direct them
Yeah.
in the right direction, and hopefully over time I can make it easier to find.
Nice. So we'll jump into the questions. So you've obviously got quite a lot of experience around kind of starting communities and then working in kind of established things. So this is going to be it's going to be super interesting to get some of your takes on this. So Rosie, what would you say is your number one tip for growing your community?
Yeah, this is one that I always kind of revert to. It's probably a little bit vague, but it kind of or it requires a bit of explanation. I always say community discovery, which is kind of like just like you have like product discovery, business discovery. You need to discover the needs of your people,
Mm.
and community discovery is, I believe, like a term that I came up with that no one was really talking about, and this taps into the idea of like of me believing that community people need better vocabulary and more words to describe the work that they're doing. And no one was really talking about discovering community needs. How do you know what people need? How do you know
Mm.
what they care about? How do you know what they're talking about? How do you know the language they use? How do you know the things that they dislike? How do you know what exists out there, what doesn't exist? And it's this just like a whole minefield of things that community founders or community managers should be doing, but I don't really think that they do enough.
Mm.
Um, and that ties into engagement because, like, if you do that research and if you build that trust up with people, then you end up naturally knowing how to engage or what to talk
Mm.
about. And a phrase that I often refer to is like it's almost like a crystal ball. Is like you can almost like read people's minds, or people say, it's like, Rosie, you read my mind. How did you know that? But it's only because it's like I I keep on top of everything that is happening that is relevant to my community. And that means keeping up with people, it means keeping up with blog posts and
Mm.
industry trends and things that people are talking about. It means keeping up with like the wider ecosystem and what's happening. So it's not just about community, but our world is very impacted by, for example, tech. Right? What are the latest tech tools out there that
Mm.
people are using? Um, Things like that. As like we as community builders, we have to kind of try our best to really understand the needs. And then if you do that and if you have a process for doing that, then you almost have too many ideas to talk about, um, or write about or to share or to pull people in to get their opinions
Mm.
on. And that's the stage like where I'm at the moment is like I've got too many ideas, I've got too many things to that I could potentially do or talk about and create engagement with. Um, and I think that shows in like the village and the forum. I'm always like bringing up things, and it's the same within the Slack. There's like always things to talk about, and like if I do raise something, then people are always coming, kind of commenting on stuff as well. Um,
Nice.
so that's the art of engagement. It's like it's real. It should address people's needs. It shouldn't be engagement for the sake of engagement. It should, it's like,
Yeah.
yes, do some fun stuff, but people get bored of that pretty quickly. They've got their lives to lead. They don't want to waste their life like on kind of like low level engagement hacks.
Sure. And in so when you're early days and you're kind of sharpening the axe of what you're kind of before you start even like stuff up, like practically, and you're kind of working out who the community is going to be for, what their needs are. How are you practically doing that? Are you talking to people one to one? Are you asking people in a group situation? Are you sending out forms? Like, before you registered the domain name, like, how are you working out what you think that community is going to need? Or is it a case of, because you are almost the person who's making the community because it's what you want, you're just using yourself as almost the guinea pig?
I think for me, it's a lot of it is like what I want, and
Hmm.
almost like being stubborn about that, or being stubborn about my kind of goals, my values, my ethics. I feel sometimes like I come across a bit like uh, strong, and like I'm like, no, I won't do that. No, I can't do. I don't believe in that.
Hmm.
Um, or I call people out sometimes. I'm like, why are you doing that? And it's like, that's not very community driven. So it's it comes from me. A lot of it comes from me. A lot of ministry of testing came from me. Like the values, the foundational values came from me, and people have appreciated that I've done things differently, or I've said no to things because I believed it would have a negative
Mm.
impact down the line, or it just didn't feel right. So I would say no to money because of that, and that's tough sometimes.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I think it's important to know what you stand for,
Hmm.
um, and people get attracted to that naturally. They're like, oh, this, these are good people, or she's trying to do this, or this is, she's genuine.
Hmm.
And I get increasingly, like in the community world at the moment, I get comments and gratitude for that. So it's like, whilst some people might not appreciate, how I stick to certain values, others do, and I
Hmm.
like stand up for people or stuff like that. I had my first meme a few months back when I kind of was supporting a community member, and I was like, "Oh, that's nice." It's like a Rosie meme, um, as a thank you. But I think a lot of community is about that, and um, if you think about what's the name of that company, uh, the company that does outdoor clothes wear,
Patagonia.
Patagonia, that's it,
Yep.
and how they stick to their values,
Yeah.
and how the founder refused to sell to sell the company, and they exited to I forget the words that they use, exited to the community or to the world, to climate
To the
change,
planet. Yeah. They almost. Yeah.
to the planet. Yeah.
So yeah, in regards to like really understanding what you think that community is going to need with Rosieland, that you mentioned there, like obviously you almost were the target audience. Like there wasn't a place where you felt that there was enough content and community for yourself as a community manager. What would that look like if, say, Patagonia approached you and said, "Look, we would really love you to come be our community manager," and you were like, "That's great. I know community. I like your values, but I don't understand your market." What would for maybe like a new community manager, maybe switching role? What should some practical steps be to really dive into that community? Is it a case of time, or is it a case of, here's some actual practical steps you could do to really get to grasp with what your people need and want?
Yeah, it's a interesting question and challenge. Um, I would like really get to the heart of the values of the community, and try my best to like try to understand who they are and where they hang out, and build relationships, or lurk to some extent on the things that they're talking about and the things that they care
Mm,
about, and trying to find the things that spark excitement or spark rage in them.
mm,
Especially with someone like a community like Patagonia, the people there, that there are things that are going to spark rage, and it's like you could probably almost tap into those things and think
mm,
of ways to create solutions around around those things that they really care about. And rage is like a form of communicating what you care about. And then like also kind of like justifying that a community is not necessarily a specific space or a specific tool. It's about working with the people and trying to find ways and get support from the company itself to solve these problems and work with the community to create something that actually creates value both for the community and hopefully for the business as well, so that there's some kind of alignment. And yeah, I guess like also from that aspect is like taking the approach of kind of being very lean about what you do or what we do, taking kind of like a minimal viable community approach and experimenting and trying things out to see what kind of ticks. But yeah, climate change stuff or
You can't do
Patagonia.
everything all at once.
No. Yeah, and that's and I think like the hard thing with community is that I think the community industry at the moment is changing, and it's very hard to define exactly what community is and how it's different for almost every company. But I think the challenge of community is that it almost touches every aspect of the business. So it's like, if community does that, it's like, how can we work with all aspects of the business? How can we work with the customers, with marketing, with business strategy, and even like some of the conversations that we've been having in Rosieland, as we're trying to like evolve our thinking, is that there's like Shane from Hopin, and he's like, well, product talks about having lots of contact and conversations with the users, but in reality, it doesn't really happen nearly as much as the product teams would like. And maybe that's a space that community could tap into. It's not that they're being customer service, but they're just trying to understand their customers a bit better and having contact with them every single day. Is potentially like where there's huge value for community to kind of show itself as like, it's not a forum, it's not a Slack space, it's we care about our people and we're going to go wherever we need to go to show that we care.
Yeah. Well, I always think that community managers are like the ultimate customer advocate. And if you could take, you know, uh, loads of your customers and distill it into like an average, and then you could take that insight and bring it into your shareholder meetings, your marketing meetings, your product meetings, that's a great voice you want in the room, because your job at the CM is, yes, to provide business to value to your business, or whatever your kind of business goals are, but also you're there just to be the voice of the people. So whether that's a case of, now's not a good time to do that because this is what the community are currently feeling, or this is the temperature of what's going on regarding that product change or that thought that you recently released. And I think it's that great conduit where you get to almost be like the voice of the people inside and have ultimately a bunch of change. And if you don't have that freedom to be, if you are just kind of being put there to do essentially customer support, then it probably feels like your manager isn't giving you quite enough freedom to actually make change, but rather than just trying to maybe firefight at that point.
Yeah, and I think it shows because like a lot of, for example, forums end up being customer support forums. And I think that's almost wrong. It's like, it's not that they shouldn't be that, but it's like it could be more than that. They could, have so much more within a forum space, but for some reason it kind of defaults so much to just being customer support. And these are the traps in community that we need to figure out. I don't have solutions for them, but it's just things like that I observe. And as I'm kind of trying to build up my Rosieland forum, I'm thinking, what do I want the space to be about? What would be of value? And I'm trying to get creative with it, and I'm trying to think of fun, new, different, useful things to do. And Yeah, so it's like, I've got like AMAs starting soon. I've got Wikipedia type posts where I'm
Mm,
collecting and curating information. I've moved that book list over to the forum, so hopefully it's easier
yeah.
to find. So it's like trying to change like the idea of what a forum is. I think is an interesting activity within itself, and that's just, I think, one example within community where we should be challenged to think of what these spaces could be and be
Mhm.
encouraged to be more creative in what we do. And I'm just not seeing a lot of that at the moment.
Nice. So, from the last 12 months, what has been the biggest challenge over at Rosieland?
Oh, biggest challenge. Doing it all myself again, I think. Um,
Okay.
trying to balance the growth. Um, Figuring out like what do I want it to be. I'm always changing my mind. I'm like always like, oh, I'm doing it paid, but should I do it free? Should I just open it up? It would be nice if everyone
Mm,
had access to all this information. What would be the ideal future of a community look like? Yeah, I think it's a lot of things to potentially juggle, like within the early stages of a community. Um, So and like I think there's also the struggle of tools. I kind of rant about this a lot. It's just I think like a couple of years ago, everybody was like anti all in one,
mm,
but now like I've been preaching like more in ones with tools because community managers are essentially managing like so many tools just to run one community. There's a different tool for every task.
mm.
And yes, you can like integrate and um, stuff like that, but it just gets it impacts the user experience. Um, so yeah, just like managing all of that plus writing content is a lot to juggle.
And as a community manager, are you blocking your time? Are you blocking your time? So you like Monday is a writing day, Tuesday is a blah 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 day, or is that not kind of how your brain works?
It's not how my life works.
Okay.
Yeah, I unschool my kids. Yeah, I try. I have like, yeah, my every day in my life is not the same, and
Mhm.
I'm still writing week to week. So like I've been meaning to like for like the past year to build up a buffer with like having a few articles a few weeks ahead of time to go,
Mm.
but I'm still writing, week by week, which is not ideal. But I think at the same time, I think I just work to deadlines. I think it's kind of like an ADHD thing as well. I work to deadlines, um, and yeah, it's yeah, it is what it is, I guess. But yeah, I unschool my kids. I've got 5 kids, and
Mhm.
just when I think like things are going well, then like a kid gets sick or my husband's away and I'm single parenting or something happens and it's just like back
Yeah.
to square one. So I kind of like trying to accept it.
Well, I'm guessing, and I don't want to speak on your behalf, but from on the outside, it seems like you've kind of created the role and the business that lets you juggle what is a potentially fairly chaotic time of life, right? With young children and whatnot, and you get to, I guess, pick your hours and kind of work around different trips or bank holidays or whatever it is that kind of may not be normal. But, you're not doing a 9 to 5. You're working when you need to work, and it feels like that you've built the business to kind of suit you rather than trying to suit you into a business.
Yeah, it's the only way for me. And it's kind of like how I did things at Ministry of Testing. So I started that 2007.
Mm,
It turned into business 2010, but I've been remote working for myself all those years. Um, So it's like I'm kind of used to it, but I'm also trying to like keep up with like how the world is changing. So obviously, when Ministry of Testing started, it was a very different world. The tools were very limited, but um, yeah, it's just a lot of great tools. I love the tech. I love the tech world and the ability to create for ourselves. And I also love the idea of just like showing that it can be done, showing that we can do things differently, and to give more power to people like me, to mothers of 5 kids, and I
Yeah.
get a lot of comments about that, and that's important. And I also work because I want to work and I love what I do, but I need for my own sanity to work. So
Yeah.
um yeah.
One of our clients at Steadfast, she was a corporate lawyer. She then had kids, and during her maternity leave was like, do you know what? I don't think I want to go back. So she started a cross stitch community, and now she sells cross stitch materials. We built her web application. She runs one of the UK's largest cross stitch communities, and she is such a great generalist, which is generally what you need from a community manager, someone who is super competent and able to do lots of things. And she's basically been able to build this business. They now employ her husband, and they're growing rapidly. And they just kind of, I think she just kind of went, kind of now's a great time to give it a go. And it is wonderful that if you are passionate and somewhat competent human, there is the tooling out there where you can go find your niche. And the wonderful thing about niches is almost the more niche you can get, the more passionate people are. Like, you only need to go to the golf course at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning when it's absolutely slashing down with rain. You're still going to find generally blokes walking around, hitting a ball around a golf course, and you're going to find those kind of niches of people. Skiing's another great niche. Like, people are so passionate about that. And you will find your people if you create the place they want to come to, whether that's community managers or tech folk or whatever it is. It's kind of a build and they will come situation. And the outlay of cost for that is no longer put on a big conference in London or do this. It is literally a time thing. There's no big outlay of cost to kind of start that anymore. Like, you don't have to do a conference if you don't want to. There's much more easier ways in,
Yeah.
which is great.
Yeah, I keep getting sucked into the idea of doing a conference for Rosieland, because I did conferences for Ministry of Testing, so I'm like, oh, it'd be
Okay.
great to do a conference, but I'm not sure yet. I'm like, should I not? Um, yeah, but also like what you touched on, like with this cross stitch community, hiring the husband in. I did the same with Ministry of Testing,
Oh,
like
really?
as it
Okay.
grew, and so I figured out like a model. I kind of brought my husband in to help, and he did a lot of the tech. He's like a tech guy,
Nice.
and that just helped build up a more robust back end system,
Mm.
and it helped build out like a membership platform, which currently generates like, I don't know, I don't even keep on top of the numbers anymore, but it's like a third of its annual income kind of thing, or half. I don't even know. I'm a terrible business owner. I just I just keep letting it. There's someone else managing it now, but yeah, I'm just trying to be as hands off as possible.
Nice.
Um, which might not be the best, but it is what it is.
So before we wrap up, what's you mentioned you've got lots of ideas, but what is in the pipeline for the next 12 months at Rosieland? What's on the radar? What should we expect to be coming up?
Yeah, good question. I'm trying to write a book. So I've not made too much progress. I was going to write a book on, and I still will, on continuous community.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a name for a framework that I have, for how I think about community. So the idea is that you need to continuously work on your community and continuously improve. The idea, the continuous part is taken from like continuous delivery kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. But over the past couple of years, I've been talking a lot about flywheels. I've been talking a lot about community discovery, MVCs, minimal viable communities, stuff like that. So, um, and it ties into like how I've thought about communities. So I'm hoping to write a book on that.
Nice.
And yeah, I've got a fair chunk of the content already on Rosieland.
Yeah.
So it's not all entirely new things, but it's just trying to pull it all together into one kind of core idea. And then yeah, I don't know, maybe do a course on that as well. But yeah, I don't know if it'll be self-paced or cohort type stuff. I'm still trying to decide on that. I'm kind of like a words person, so I kind of get like pulled into the idea of courses, but I just prefer writing. So maybe a book is enough. I'm not sure yet.
It's exciting.
But also along the way, I've been doing some workshops on community business type stuff, and I've been writing articles on that. So I think I'll actually end up with a book on that first, because
Okay.
it's a combination of what I'm working on at the moment. So I might, yeah, maybe I'll end up with 2 books this year, and self-published kind of PDFs and EPUB type stuff. But and just like generally, it's just like continue growing the community,
Yeah.
continue growing the subscription, and like exploring maybe like these smaller products to try to encourage people to buy in a way that isn't a subscription model, kind of like
Nice.
having smaller digital products, just to have that kind of balance between things. I think there's a lot of kind of subscription fatigue at the moment,
Mm.
so I'm trying to think about that as a way to grow community in general. It's like, should communities be recurring subscription, or should they just be kind of like a one-off
Mm.
lifetime model? It depends, right? But I like the lifetime model because it's easy on the community founder or the manager as well. It's
Yeah.
easier to manage. So like, for example, at the moment, recurrent subscription with Rosieland. If someone unsubscribes, in theory, I'm supposed to like remove them from the Slack.
Sure.
And that just feels terrible, to be honest. It's not like something that fills me with joy.
Mm.
So I'm kind of like, well, maybe I should just do it so that they get access forever, and it kind of feels nicer, I guess. So yeah, and that's also just tapping into trends as well, right? And that's why it's important to tap into like how the world is changing.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, Rosie. Really do appreciate it. And for anyone who hasn't checked out Rosieland, I would highly recommend it. Get involved with the community, but also use it as a great place to borrow Rosie's thoughts, because there's so much great content on there. And if you are, like I said, looking for a code of conduct or whatever it is, you probably already have it written down, filed away somewhere useful. So it's a great place for that. So I'm guessing Rosieland is the best place to find more about you, Rosie. But is there anywhere else on the internet where you would want to point people to?
Twitter, I guess. Even though I don't know where Twitter's going at the moment, each month it gets a little bit worse. But yeah, I'm Rosie Shay there, or LinkedIn, I guess.
Nice.
I'm there as well.
Appreciate it. Well, until the next time, we will speak to you next time. But thank you so much for joining us, Rosie. And I'm sure we'll chat soon.